Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to start the closing keynote, really looking at the new energy transition. Before we start, my name is Paddy Young. I'm the Director of European Utility Week. And for me, it's a real pleasure to be stood on the Initiate hub and really moderate this session. Just something a little bit maybe more corporate before we kick off into this. I'd just like to say how really delighted I am to be here. We started Initiate 4 years ago, and one thing that we didn't want to be when we started was just another organizer that was thinking about how they could potentially add value to an event, and then they sit in a room and they think we'll add conferences, we'll add a little bit of this, and we'll do innovation. And when we discussed this, we wanted to really get involved in innovation on the broader sense. We didn't want to be just a show for large companies. We wanted to be a show for startups, for new technologies. We wanted to be an exhibition that really stimulated innovation. We wanted it to be an event that really helped the talent of the future enter the market and have a voice. So it was something that we said, we are not just going to pay lip service to this innovation thing, we want to be committed to it. This is now going to be going to another level since Clarion Power and Energy have just acquired an event called PowerGen and Distributech, which now means that we can roll out Initiate into Asia, Southeast Asia, into China, into Africa, and North America as just a start. So, sorry, including Australia there. So for us and for someone like Siska, who's been here pushing it forward for years, we're delighted to be able to connect these communities and really make a difference. So just to let you know, this is not just an event organizer doing innovation. We want to make a difference. We want this to really count. So I'm delighted to be stood here and be involved. Thank you, Siska, for the opportunity. So what are we really looking about? We're looking about the clean energy transition. We're looking at the new energy mix and the fact that it is, we look around and there's a lot of technology, but it's very much more than a technological thing. It's a cultural thing. As well. It involves people, and people need to be involved in that transition. People need to be connected to that transition. It needs to be a fair transition. So what we want to look at here is this development of technology and people. And so really very interesting topic. So the program we'll look at 2 case studies, questions and answers, and please ask questions, otherwise I'll be stuck with asking the questions and they may not be as good as yours, so I'll be looking for lots of participation. Then we'll go through the challenges. During the 3 days, we've had 4 challenges on specific areas, of which the young talent have been looking at this with mentors and developing answers to these challenges, and the winners will be presenting those challenges later on this afternoon. So we have a tight schedule. We need to be finished by 4. So thanks everyone for coming here, and we'll kick off now with Tyne Wall, who is from head of strategy and innovation at E.ON, and I'd like to welcome him to the stage, please. Sorry. Pleasure.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Ty Wall, Head of Digital Strategy and Transformation at E.ON, and soon also our Future Lab, so the innovation hub that's part of our strategy and our overall digital program. I've got the enviable task of explaining a 42,000-person, 32 million customer company's digital transformation in 10 minutes. So I've got about 9 to go, I think. So the energy world as we knew it, especially in Germany, not a very fast-moving beast, very heavy engineering centric, really long lead times, huge assets, lots and lots of money. The challenge for us, and for many of you I'm sure, is how we turn a company like that, with a focus like that, and a workforce that's working toward that, to something that can keep up with today's ever-changing market and ever-changing customer expectations. So, speaking of customer expectations, my opinion is that we're not up against our competitors in the energy market. We're up against anybody who develops a piece of technology, a relationship with the customer, any interface or touch point we have with the customers. Because personally, I don't want to spend lots of time on my energy company's mobile app. When I do, I want to know how much I owe, when I need to pay, and do that really seamlessly. So my level of expectation is the same level of expectation I have when I use Uber, for example, or any native applications on my mobile device. So that's what our customers want from us, and that's the challenge we have to deliver to them. The market is also changing drastically. This has forced us into, I think, a pretty healthy way of looking at our business and looking at ourselves and how we want to be not just perceived by our customers, but also by the market. This means that we can't spend all of that time planning our assets and where we're going next. It means we need to fundamentally change the way we approach solving problems, the way we approach new businesses. So this market competition has been really healthy for us, and I think it's led us to some exciting things. But our employees are actually expecting more from us than ever before as well. I was on a panel recently about millennials in the workforce, and it was millennial bingo, right? Entitled, lots of careers. This is not just millennials. This is all employees now. So we need to be a purpose-driven company. We need to give people opportunities. We need to give them new skills, if that's what they're interested in. And we need to be not just a nice workplace, but someplace that people enjoy spending the vast majority of their time. I spend more time at work than I do with my family at home, and it needs to be a pretty nice place, or I'm going to go somewhere else. And I think the same is true for all of you. And then all of this is underpinned by the technological advances. So how do we actually make that customer experience at the level our customers expect? And that's, as you'll see here, focusing on mobile. So we want to interact with our customers the way they live. We don't want to force them into some model that doesn't really work well for them. It's putting data into every single thing we do, and I'll touch on that more in a second, but how do we make our grid smarter? How do we eventually get so efficient that our prices get so competitive that people come to us because it's the natural choice? And then the next step is, how do we get them to use green energy and essentially make the world and our company more sustainable? Because the aspiration is that becomes the easy, cost-effective choice, not just doing it because you're feeling philanthropic. All these things I'm sure are familiar to you: platforms, software beats assets, and then automation. So we're touching or dipping our toe into robotics now, but what comes next? What bloated pieces of the non-fun work can we take out of people's day-to-day lives? And here's how we're doing that at Eon in the most distilled version possible. And this itself is a step. When I joined Eon a little over a year ago, the top part of this pyramid existed. So we were focused purely on, or almost purely on, technology. So the automation, the optimization, redesigning businesses, and then new businesses. And one of the first things I did, I think my first week on the job, is put this foundation on the bottom. Because we and none of you can be successful in your transformations unless your people are empowered to transform. Unless they feel like they're part of what's going to happen, they're part of the future, that they believe in what your company is doing, and that you give them the assets or just the ability and the freedom to work the way they live. We talk about diversity in the workplace. We talk about a culture of working in an agile way and being rewarded for working in teams rather than your individual achievements. And all of this is part of our overall transformation effort. So we don't just want to digitize the company, we want to fundamentally change the way Eon operates through a digital lens. And we have lots of aspirations for doing this. Admittedly, we're not finished. We've got a ways to go. But we want to make our company the best possible place for the smartest people to come and work. I don't care if that's I was going to say something probably not politically correct, but I don't care what age the person is who applies. The most brilliant, hardworking person I want to apply to Eon because it's the choice for them. The customer should be at the heart of everything we do, and when I say the customer, yes, the end user, the customer who uses our electricity to turn on their lights, but also the employee. So if we're talking about digitization and technology, I want the customer there as the employee to feel like they're being listened to and they're getting what they need from us. Basing decisions on data, so everyone can do analytics. I'm willing to bet 95% of the people in this crowd have a data lake, or at least are in the process of doing that. But that only matters and that only benefits you if you change your behaviors based on that data you have. That's making smarter decisions, that's becoming better with your asset planning, that's becoming better with your budgeting. So every step of the way, using data to influence your decisions. That I mentioned that empowerment piece before, so thinking digitally, thinking about how you and other people can work together to achieve something rather than how you can hit your own individual targets. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, making Eon the safest possible place it can be. Because a single workplace injury, a single death by an employee is far too much, and it should never happen. So we want to use digital to decrease the chances of that happening as much as we possibly can. And here's how we're doing that from a cultural perspective. So I could spend an hour talking about this, but painting that vision for where we want to go as a company. So explaining where we're going and giving people something they can get behind. Clearly communicating that, which sounds like it should be the easy part, but it's pretty difficult actually. Making sure everyone feels engaged. So we actually ask every Eon employee what they think about digitization and if they want to get involved and if they feel like they can. And then we tailor our approach based on what our customers in this case, or our employees, ask for. And we try to get as many people involved as we possibly can. And then the capabilities. So I'm sure there's been lots of discussion this week around what happens when a lot of our jobs are automated or AI comes in and takes care of all these processes. So some people are nervous about that. And how do we give them the opportunity to get upskilled into the kind of career that comes next? And then finally, the governance piece. So what do we actually put behind all of this? How do we link all of this into our business initiatives? Because we should not just have a digital strategy for the sake of having a digital strategy. It should be tied back into our business strategy. And we actually help influence our business strategy through our expertise in digital. And then measuring the value we create. So yes, we work in an agile way. We quickly spin things up or wind them down. But what is our impact on the bottom line? And how are we helping move Eon toward its future? So yes, we're an energy company, and we come from a sort of an old school background. But as you probably know, Eon's diversified its product portfolio pretty drastically over the last few years into e-mobility and smart home. We are an incredible place to work, and I see a couple of my colleagues here. They probably conveyed the same message to you earlier when they were judges on this panel, but Eon has a vision for the future about how we, as an energy company, can help them make the world a more sustainable place. So, my final pitch, if you're interested in being part of this journey, and you really want to make a difference in the world through energy and whatever comes next in the energy industry, come and find me afterward and we can have a talk about it. So, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Ty. It's very interesting talking about internal culture and a company with purpose, and I think something just to congratulate Eon. Eon obviously very much focused on internal communications on products, but they've recently won a global award for branding as an established mark, and it shows the power of focusing on internally. If you want to be able to engage with customers externally, you have to start with a central vision and purpose, and I think Eon do that exceptionally well, and a good case study. Okay, now the next case study, I'd like to welcome Nathan Ott, who's actually Chief Polisher at the Game Changer Index, who's going to be looking at transformation and digital talent. What role does data play in Eon's digital transformation? Young Talent Program, Eon, what can we learn from other similar industries and when it comes into fruition within the digital transformation? So I'd like to welcome Nathan here on stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Paddy. Hi, everyone. It's actually my third time here, Initiate, and it's great to see it growing and growing. So congratulations, Setska. Great job, and you in Energy Utility Week. So I'm here, a bit like Ty, 10 minutes to talk to you about the last 5 years of really helping organisations liberate everyone to impact a digital transformation. So I'm going to take you through something to think about for your own organisations and give you a couple of case studies as well for that. Okay, just some very basic stats. Why are we talking about digital transformation? Gartner said it's the top priority for CEOs, not just in energy, pretty much most organisations. And according to Accenture, 90% of digital projects fail to deliver their objectives. Let's say that that's 50% wrong. It's still a big number. Okay, so it's important to organizations. For the energy industry, we know this is basic stuff. We know this. We know why digital is crucial. It's not the only thing that's crucial, but it's crucial. There's new competitions, new products, and it's changing rapidly, and that change is constant. There's with humans, we fear change. We know that, yeah, okay, but we have to change to survive. It's the paradox of human nature, actually. And consumers can adapt more rapidly to the new opportunities faster than a collection of individuals, which are our organizations. So organizations do have a significant lag time to the demands of the consumer. Okay, it's quite simple. The individual changing quicker than the collective. And what this does, therefore, is it creates a myriad of demands on your people in your organization. Okay, it creates a tension. Okay, that we have to change, we have to go digital, all these buzzwords that we keep hearing. And there are some very specific tensions which are actually paralyzing our organizations. Digital's a buzzword, right? Digital is digital, it's change effectively. And the world is moving more digitally, but just want to break it down a little bit for make people understand. This is what we do with organizations, just try and break down digital, okay? I mean, it's everywhere in our organization. First part, there's digital in our business as usual, okay? Stuff that where we have to incrementally improve what we're doing already with digital. It could be simple as online billing, improving the network slightly, whatever it might be, but it's business as usual stuff. It's problem-centered. We have to fix a problem using digital. Improving existing processes, okay? So digital doesn't have to be this fanciful thing that everyone's scared of. It just helps us improve and move us on. The other part, the other demand, is this notion of future opportunities. The world, the possible, the new things. We have to do something radically different over the next 5 or 10 years, otherwise our market is gone. We're going to lose all our consumers. Amazon's going to come in and take it all over. There's that fear. But this is possibility-centered. This is much more stuff that's intangible and goes against the business as usual, but we have to do it. Again, we have to make that leap if we're going to survive. And this is doing things we haven't done before, and that's really threatening for individuals, or certain individuals in organizations. So really, what we talk about the tensions and the demands of digital transformation is how do we make sure that we're pursuing these future opportunities whilst maintaining the business as usual? How are we taking those opportunities back into the business as usual? Yeah, and they're both important, and they don't stop. It's not a one-off thing. Digital transformation is not a one-off thing. It's constant. Time is a continuum. So what we decided to do was, well, how do we get organizations to get all of their people to understand how they contribute to both of these things, yeah, at the same time? Because then life should be easier. So remember, you're not alone. Okay, I'm not an energy specialist, we work with energy companies, but this is not just an energy-specific issue. These are some of the organizations work, there are many more. I'll just take one, Arm, they're over there, I've seen them. You all know Arm, you're all using Arm in your phones, no doubt, okay? Just been purchased, well, for $22 billion. Yeah, they're a 4,000 person organization. They have to do things radically different than they've done before, radically different. Whilst maintaining fantastic processors for your mobile phones, they're now having to connect 300 trillion devices over the next 5 years. Radically different, okay? They still need the same people, the same impact that they had to get them where they got to, but they do have to embrace doing things radically different. So we break these things down into what we do into idea-focused and task-focused, okay? Some people are idea-focused more, some people are more task-focused, but there's a difference. There's individuals in our organizations that actually enjoy the radical thinking. They actually want to do things right. You probably know who they are in your organization. They're a bit different, okay? But they do buck the trend of the traditional organization, but if we stifle them, we lose them. So we have to embrace them. They're the ones that might have some creative ideas in that possibility-centered world. But these radical ideas are no good unless you can actually make business sense of them, right? Okay, it's great having wonderful ideas, but they've got to make business sense. They've got to make sure we fit back into the business as usual, take them back into the business as usual. But an idea, however elegant it may be, and how much business sense it might make, yeah, is no good unless we actually get on and do something about it, make it happen. Okay, all right, let's actually make it happen. Let's get it done. Okay, let's get some tangible outputs because that's what our organization really values. Okay, and then let's make it the best it can be. Okay, let's really make sure that we're making it as best we can be. Let's continue to improve it. And that's all very nice, but we need to make sure that we actually do have some impactful collaboration that's going on between all these different dimensions at once. And I mean impactful collaboration. I don't mean we collaborate around here because, oh, we go out for drinks together, or I remember your birthday. I mean real impactful collaboration around these two tensions, okay? So what you have in a model, and you can see already that this scales up at an individual level, it scales up at a team level, it scales up at an organization level. And we're trying to make sure that everyone knows where their impact at each time. But we need to make sure these two sides collaborate. So what we do is we work with organizations to make sure that the business as usual does collectively work with the future opportunities at once. And I'm not talking about labs in the corner. Sorry for those that have innovation labs. It's important, but how do we make sure we bring them back? Okay? And so what we're trying to do is make sure that everyone can align to your digital transformation. Because digital, if it's just about being creative and doing things radically different, it's not helpful. Okay? It's really not helpful. It's a bit like having a kids football team or a kids sport team where you want to create a winning culture, and the only way of winning, or people think the way of winning, is by scoring goals. Yeah? No. It takes a whole team to create a winning culture, not just the people that score the goals, hence why it takes everyone to help your digital transformation. I said I'll work with a couple of case studies. So we do a lot of work in telco, energy sector, a lot of similarities as well. The energy sector, highly regulated, very engineer, very technical focused. Orange is a classic example. Orange, look up, they're cool now, they're called Orange. Yeah, but they're France Telecom, all right? Okay, that's really what they are. And they also, we're now a digital company, we're a digital company. Well, guess what? For the next 5 years, 80% of your revenues is still going to be by voice and data, okay? So we need to make sure that we get everybody that's delivering core services and core stuff, making sure they understand their values and their impact. They're not just called old-fashioned or laggards, or and then the new group that are looking at new digital solutions for Orange are not just seen as the crazy ones where these guys are making all the money. So it's linking them all together, okay? Because people do have to understand how they impact the outcome. And just finally, I thought I'd push one a bit further out, not just telco, let's look at Nike. I mean, even organizations like Nike struggle with this, right? It's not just energy companies, okay? And, Nike say that they have an innovative culture. It is, but just to turn around and say, be innovative tomorrow, be innovative next week is not helpful to individuals. So what we try and do is make sure is that everybody knows how they contribute to the process of innovation or digital transformation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Thank you very much, Ty. Very interesting. Just listening to both presentations, I think we've all been in positions where we're going through a sort of a change process, and it is quite confusing. It is very difficult for a workforce. But what we're describing here is something it's almost continual disruption, and that must be very, very, very tiring for a company. So I'm just curious, at a company like E.ON, what would you say when you're going through this process? What is one of the most essential elements within this to help your staff cope with a situation like that?
Sure. So I mentioned earlier we do a lot of surveys because we want to hear from people and what their concerns are. And I've got two answers. The first is that we paint that long-term vision, because you're right, this is constant, this keeps going, but at some point we'll stop talking about digital and we'll start talking about something else. So it's a gradual step-by-step process, and if people understand where we're going, then they'll buy into that process and help us. The next is linking it into the value we're creating, so that not only are people bought in, but the business is bought in as well. Continue to invest, and then eventually reap the rewards. Great.
Now that's linking to value that they're creating. I think that's a purpose aspect, and I think that is, on a personal level, that I think is very important. And the same question to you, Nathan. When you're going in, you're in a company, they've asked you to look at this process. Where do you find maybe the biggest issues that these companies have within managing something like that? What's the reason why they need to bring you in and sort things out?
Yeah, well, we normally start with the leadership because leadership helps, it drives the culture, and it's really liberating for the leaders as well, right? Because the leaders have got to where they've got to in these organisations by doing certain things, and all of a sudden they're just being told you've got to be creative, or you've got to do this, and you've got to do that, you've got to change, and so well, it starts making them feel useless. Whereas if you start with the leaders and go, look, this is, how are you embracing or harnessing the process of creativity in your organisation, and this is how you can do that, and that's much easier than saying, be creative, or you're too old, or you're not right, or whatever. So it's making sure that we, then we start with that, and then you move through the organisation in pockets and teams to understand then how those different teams are actually going to talk to each other and impact your transformation. Yeah.
Ty, I think you have something to add.
Completely agree. This is why we have leadership capabilities in our enablers, because though those executives or those leaders may not be participating in the day-to-day transformation, it's important that they understand how they can enable their teams to participate, how it will affect them, and then eventually how we work this into the way we measure our performance and our team's performances. Yeah,
that's very interesting. I'm the only one with grey hair on stage, but I see and read about so many times where you have new technology and senior management try and fit in their old ways of measuring things, old ways of doing things into this fantastic new system. So I think this is something, and I think this leadership element is where it all starts in many ways.
No, it does, and the reverse is true for young talent coming into the business as well, right? Because the young talent, they hear all these things, and exciting company like Eon doing exciting things, and then on day one they come in and it's, well, you've got to do some stuff. We're not paying you for your bright ideas. Come and do some stuff to earn your stripes around here. And that can be quite disengaging for the young talent. So it's also showing them that, you do have to do, whether you work for Google or the government, when you leave university, you've got to do some stuff, right? I mean, that's not going to change for a while. But it's making sure we help them understand how they can actually play a role and impact as well. And it works through the whole organisation.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point, looking at it from both ends of the spectrum. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? I'm sure it's very thought-provoking, and I think because it's quite personal, I'm sure we've all been in positions like this. So this is your opportunity to ask a question to either Ty or Nathan.
Is anybody going through a digital transformation right now in their organisation? Put your hand up. Yeah, go ahead. Is that it? You've come to a digital transformation thing, and there's only one of you doing it. I don't believe you. Yeah.
There's a lot of shy people in the audience.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So. Seriously, no questions at this point. Is there anything that if you're moving into this area and you're preparing a company or yourselves, it's we talk about surveys. If I think about surveys, people can be quite cynical about here's another survey. No one's going to do anything with them. I know we can always say that, but that engagement is key. How do you make it demonstrable that you're taking those results, you're listening, and you're doing something with them?
Sure. I think thinking of a survey in a vacuum is not very interesting. But no one had done this before. No one actually asked the employees of our organization what they thought. And part of what we push is transparency within our company. So we want to see the bad stuff almost more than we want to see the good stuff. And then we actually form working groups around some of these issues that we have. And we give people time, we give people budget if they need it, and then we have the working groups publicly publish their results so that we can see progress. And then we measure the next step and see if we did make progress, and if not, we go back to the drawing board. But people are excited and people are also concerned. So giving them the opportunity to give their feedback, people jumped at, and we had a lot of participation actually.
Okay, Nathan, do you have anything to add?
I think the data is useful if it's used in the right way. So there's a data point. I think certainly when we look to get to the core of sort of some of the data we want to get is trying to understand how decisions get made in the organisation, how people are basing their decisions, and if they're basing their decisions on the tried and tested. Yeah, that's a very different leap to doing things differently and vice versa. So very useful to understand how individuals are feeling, how they are, but we want to try and get to understanding how decisions are actually made day to day within teams, within organisations, and that helps then enable all individuals to know how they can impact that.
Yeah, decision making. Sorry, Ty, carry on.
We, like many of you, I'm sure, have a very complicated organizational structure as well. So we operate in 7 different regions. We have, as I mentioned, 42,000 employees. So different user groups, different job roles. People have different expectations. And it's also really nice to see how motivated people are, how concerned they are, how much they want to be part of this in different regions, in different business units. So it helps guide our strategy, actually. So I also like to be able to break it down and see how individual groups think about these things.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. There's just, has that stimulated any questions? Anyone else? Yeah. Yes. Bertie, there.
Down in front.
There.
Yeah, thank you. Just to give some concrete examples on how you educate your people, how you train, how you motivate them, because you put this at the basis of your pyramid, but give some concrete examples to change the mindset or to give this confidence in the strategy.
Sure. There are a couple questions loaded in there. How we engage and train our employees. So one thing that I think is or a couple things that I think are important are just agile methodologies and design thinking. So we have teams that go across the company, and we've trained 3,000 people in agile methodologies, not just developers, but trying to introduce new ways of working and new ways of thinking to people who haven't necessarily been exposed to it. We're building a digital academy now, with the goal being not only that broad base of digital knowledge for people who have questions, but also people who can get micro degrees. So we've partnered with Udacity on this in data science. So they can, if they'd like, change their job role or add a new skill, and we prioritize data science first. We also have lots of traditional sort of change management engagement, events, ambassadors, newsletters, all of the things that go into sort of a general transformation program.
Great. Nathan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, what we work is we focus on business outcomes and how that person impacts that business outcome. So what we've seen historically is you go and do some lovely HR leadership stuff, and it becomes quite fluffy and doesn't actually help you get to a business outcome. So it's actually bringing the talent bit or the HR bit aligned with the business outcomes, and people then know what skills they need, what competencies they need to actually achieve that outcome, but in a much more business-focused way rather than how you're feeling today type of way. Yeah. I see that secondary.
Very good point. Any other? Okay, Simon, what would you, Areti or? Should we just throw it around? Okay. There we go.
Simon Anderson from Zigzag Strategy and Research. What role does emotion play in this? Because an awful lot of what you've talked about seems to be quite structural, process-orientated and so on. But I can't help thinking that getting the emotion engaged is the most important part in doing any change transformation.
And the most overlooked often as well, because a lot of what we're talking when we talk about transformation is not just a layer of technology or rolling something out to people's phones. It's fundamentally changing the way people work, the way people are measured, the way people are incentivized, and the people side of it is the most delicate and most difficult. So I mentioned the broader transformation activities or the enablers. All of that is intended to make people feel engaged, to increase visibility, to decrease bureaucracy, to give people access. Emotions are what drive the success or failure of a transformation ultimately.
Yeah, I think, because I'm quite curious what Nathan's angle is, because as someone that comes in and is just, as he said, looking at business outcomes, it's quite a solid, this is what we're looking for, but there is that emotional journey for people.
You know, that there is, and I think we've been seduced in the Western world, certainly for the last 20, 30 years, by this thing called emotional intelligence. It's a bit of a conceptual muddle, really. We can discuss that over a beer. But I mean, I think the real notion is that, if we want to try and make people potent, and people feel potent, almost masterful, when they're making an impact, they're good at it, they enjoy it, and actually they're valued for it as well. They're actually valued for what they do. And yeah, there's clearly a behaviours and internal dialogue behaviours, emotional bit to it, but it's that fundamental of we're human doings at the end of the day, and if we're doing something that is valued and we're good at it, then we can become beings, and that's what moves us into a different level, really.
Now, making people potent. Now that's
Potency. I mean, we hear potent, masterful. You know,
Yeah,
we all go to work to want to make an impact. We do that. We get up to make an impact, and if we can do that, and it's valued by our organisation throughout, it's it's a better place. It's not easy though. It's not easy. Yeah. Sorry. Valued, exactly. If you'll be valued, if you're not valued for it, you can. It all doesn't make you potent.
No. What a complex, very complex, and that's just internally. Then it's a case, and then there's product development, and then there's actually taking that out to market as well. So it is very complicated and very much overlooked in some of these things. The process. So that's all we have time for here. So Tyne and Nathan.
Thanks, Paddy. Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And,
Thanks very much.
Round
Thank
of
you.
applause to put your hands together.
Thanks,
for.
Ty. Thank you. Cheers. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Really good. And it's funny, we didn't have time. I wanted to ask a question, which I won't do, but it was about recruitment, because we have 100 students from the Inno Energy program who've been working very hard. Actually, can I put this down? Sorry. Who've been working very hard over the last 2 days. There's been 4 challenges that these Inno Energy students have been looking at. And there's been a selection process, and the winners have been announced. So what I'd like to do is invite onto stage the first challenge mentor, if that's the right way of putting it. I'd like to welcome on stage Richard Boston, who's Innovation Manager of E.ON, to introduce the challenge and the winner. Welcome.
Hey everybody, my name is Richard Boston. I work as an innovation manager for E.ON, and this is our second year here working with the students, which is always inspiring. It's so interesting and so funny to see them, how they are so enthusiastic, taking on our challenge with 100% full throttle all the way to the end. So this year we were talking about the value of data. With smart metering, we will get so much new data from our customers, but how can we create value of this data for our customers? That is always a challenge, because in our vision, we're going to improve people's life. And how can we improve people's life with this new data was a challenge that were given to the students. So the students were working on coming up with a proposal or a pitch for us. There were 5 teams working on this, and they were coming up with a problem worth solving, also something that the customer will use or be willing to pay for, and something that will make us stand out from our competition. So we had 5 teams that pitched for us this morning. There were 5 super interesting ideas, but there was one that was a bit better than the others, and this team took something really complex and make it really, really simple, and what we think is a really, really interesting way of using this data to make it simple and to actually make it something that the customers will use and even pay for. So I'm really, really happy to introduce the winning team, team number 5. So welcome on stage. Yeah.
Good afternoon. So I'm the representative of the Team 5, and I would like you to introduce our idea. So our...
That is not the slides. Wrong slides.
Oh.
That is not your pitch, but okay.
Okay, so you have some problem with the presentation, so our task was to create some new value from the data of the smart meters. And here you can see our team. It consists of 4 people, Tabe, Esteban, Almudena, and Miladi. And as I mentioned before, we had this task to come up with some new value of the data for the smart meter. So we were thinking about landowners who owns a property, and they are renting it for a short-term period, usually Airbnb. Those people are trying to make some extra profit by renting the places, and usually they are very busy with their other things in life, so it's very hard for them to monitor their house. And of course, sometimes the people who are renting the house, they take advantage of it, and they, for instance, check out late, or they consume too much energy, or they even forget to switch up certain devices when they're leaving. We could even think about people who might rent the place for like Bitcoin mining, or, well, that's the extreme case, but it might happen. So we were thinking about those people, and they, of course, would like to keep their property monitor as best as possible. And you can always do it with some camera system or other security systems, but of course those devices are expensive. So we're thinking maybe we can use the smart meter, which you already have in-house, and use the data smartly in a way that you can actually see what time the people are checking out, depending on the consumption. And you could set up in an app, a simple app that you would just set how much consumption approximately should those people consume, or until what time did you consume. And as long as they should check out at 10 o'clock in the afternoon, in the morning, and their consumption is still rising afterwards, that means that they are still in a house. It could be also used for a seasonal property monitoring. So for instance, you might have a summer cottage which you use only occasionally, and then suddenly you see that there is certain rise of the energy, so you might get an alert there's something happening in your house but it's not supposed to, whether someone broke in and staying in the house, or just simply a certain device broke down, that's why your energy is increased. So we came up with a small idea, and we were thinking that turn this into business plan, we would come up with a small fee for the subscription, that you would get this app and you would get this idea and alerts in case something would happen with your property. At the beginning, we were thinking to just with a small market. We were thinking about Prague. Not only it's just because it's my home country, but also because it's a very big R&B market, and that you could simply try to optimize the app there and find the potential customers. From that, we could take off the whole country and eventually all Europe. So for the beginning, we were thinking to just this initial idea get going. We need a plan to start analyzing the market, find the potential customers, and of course develop the service. We were thinking about scaling up. This is a little bit like ambitious plan, but we were thinking, as I mentioned before, to start with Prague, and then eventually continue within the whole country, then Central Europe and Europe. And if we would manage to actually keep up with this ambition plan and with this small subscription, we would manage to get quite nice return on investment. All right, so this is our simple idea, and thank you for your attention.
Does anyone have any questions around this topic before we move on? No? Okay, thank you very much. We'll try and when the presentation will be done, it would be nice to think of something, and we'll have a bit of a question and answer afterwards. Well, thank you very much and congratulations. Now moving on to the second challenge. Now this is something that it was around hydrogen. I'm a marketer, not an engineer, so I read a lot about hydrogen and I get very excited, maybe because I don't really fully understand the technical challenges around it, but I look at it with storage, I look at it, the role it could play in the clean energy transition. So when I saw this was one of the challenges, I was very excited, and maybe I will learn a little bit more from this. So I would like to welcome on stage Bram Smeets, Associate Partner and Solution Leader at McKinsey Energy Insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We worked with a very energetic group of students in five teams, felt inspired by the great ideas that they shared with us. Two people from the winning team, Miles and Julia, are with me on the stage right now, and we'll indeed be talking about the great idea that they came up with in the context of hydrogen and its role in the energy system in 2040. Now, before we go there, I was asked to also put our challenge in the context of some of the work that we do and some of the perspectives that we have on the new energy mix, and basically provide some perspective on what this energy system in 2040 is going to look like. At a very high level, what we see is in many of the work of the pieces of work that we do with many of our clients, that energy demand growth is going to slow down. And if we look where we are today, we see that in the next 30 years or so, we're going to have another 26% of demand being added. To give you a sense, that's about the size of China today in terms of energy demand. But if we look at the bottom, at the rate of growth, what we see is that going forward, we're going to go down from 2.1% per year in the past 15 years or so to rates of 0.9, 0.5% even, which is really a breakthrough because it's a growth rate that we haven't seen in over 100 years. So we need to go back to basically the very beginnings of the Industrial Revolution to see that type of growth rates. And what's driving this is, of course, efficiency gains, the introduction of renewables in the system, also structural drivers in terms of economics, population growth that's slowing down. If we then double-click and we say, okay, this energy, how does it break down? What's the role of the different types of energy? Particularly in being here in the last couple of days talking a lot about electricity, it's interesting to realize that actually the rate of electricity growth is going to be 4 times as high as the rate of growth of all the other fuels combined. So the left-hand side here shows you an indexed perspective on growth, and electricity demand is going to pretty much double globally in the next 30 years or so. We see scenarios where that's much more, particularly if you think that decarbonization is going to take flight much more than it is right now. And what we see if we look at the other fuels, it's really a flattening. It's a plateau, and we're now actually in some of the scenario work seeing that there's going to be a peak, and that as well. Then if we look at the different generation technologies within electricity generation, of course, we've heard many discussions in the past couple of days about the role of renewables, the way to integrate that in the systems. What we see is that basically 80% and more of the growth in energy demand, in electricity demand, is going to be provided by solar and wind alone. We see that coal is going to diminish. We see that gas is likely to remain stable in terms of growth. And what you have to believe for that is that gas is there to play a role in providing flexibility. So we see that gas changes from baseload provider today to much more of a backup, of a flexibility option in 20, 30 years' time. Now, if we're thinking about hydrogen in a moment, hydrogen can be the big contender there. Then if we look at what that means for the total demand for fossil fuels, we see that, first of all, there's going to be a peak in coal demand that's going to occur in the next 10 years or earlier. We see that there's going to peak in oil demand as well in about 20 years. And we see that gas is going to grow moderately, but then again, in scenarios where you believe hydrogen is going to pick up much more fastly, actually that might come down as well. If we aggregate it all together, we're prepared for a world in which fossil fuel demand is going to peak within 16, 17 years from now. Now, this was very much a macro story. So this was a perspective at the highest level globally. We're convinced that in order to properly understand this, what we need is tools and perspectives that really look at these transitions at a granular level. So there is not really such thing as the energy transition. There is an aggregation of many transitions that are happening at the country level, at a sector level, for individual fuels. And to that extent, or to that purpose, what we've developed is a tool, a model that actually makes that cut, that looks at the intersections of those key dimensions. And the perspectives that I just shared are really the aggregations of all of that. If we then use that tool to test some of the sensitivities, what we see is that, I mentioned earlier that we see a peak in oil demand coming in about 20 years. What we see is that there's actually easily a future that you could imagine where oil demand peaks much faster. So what we looked at is, on the left-hand side, this is the curve that we project for oil demand. So in our reference case, we see a peak in 2037, and pretty much a plateau. But then if we say, hold on, if electrification of transport, of road transport, is going to go faster, we see that line coming down quite significantly. If on top of that, we're going to be much more efficient in the packaging, such that plastics demand is going to be reduced, and we're going to recycle much more of plastics as well, then actually you might end up in a situation where your demand for oil by 2050 is going to be more than 20 million barrels lower, and the peak is going to come much earlier. Now, these are significant differences if you are in the oil business, of course, and you need to make investment decisions today or in 5 or 10 years' time. Nope. Now, in order to believe or in order to see such a future be realized, there's quite a couple of requirements that need to be realized in energy systems. And this is just a selection from many other factors that you could think of. But some of the ones that we had on our radar, also in the context of the hydrogen work, is will there be sufficient flexibility to accommodate all of these renewables in the system? Will there be a market design that's going to support the investments to increase the role of renewables in storage? Shifting from generation to capacity renovations, for example. Will there be sufficient coordination? So if we're talking about decarbonization of industry, will we actually see that there's going to be a harmonized approach such that you do not have industrial players in Europe moving out of Europe because the regulations are less strict? Will innovation and technological development be able to catch up and develop rapidly enough? And in the end, will we see actually new energy carriers that become available at scale in order to play this role and in order to be a catalyst? And this is where actually hydrogen comes in, because hydrogen can provide a solution to many of these, if not all. What we asked the teams to look into is what will then be the role of hydrogen in 2040, and how can we get there? What's the roadmap? With that, let me hand over to Miles and Julia.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. So to begin, we looked at the challenges associated with hydrogen production today. First of all, being the cost. But another big challenge is the infrastructure and transport for distribution of hydrogen, which currently does not exist in many regions. Thirdly, green hydrogen production, as the vast majority of hydrogen produced today is currently from fossil fuels. Then a low power to hydrogen to power efficiency, so converting electricity to hydrogen to electricity, as well as safety concerns due to the high flammability of hydrogen. And then we identified our windows of opportunity of hydrogen as an energy carrier. So it's used in many industrial processes, such as oil refining. It can be also mixed with natural gas, up to 4% without changing any of the existing gas infrastructure, and also in the transportation sector for heavy-duty vehicles specifically, because even though there's a large trend towards electric vehicles these days, the heavy-duty vehicles are not well suited to be electric due to concerns such as charging time, range, and large battery size.
Thank you, Miles. So, taking into consideration everything that has been said now, we tried to identify which was the best potential market that we could target. And we decided it was Middle East. Why Middle East? First of all, they currently have hydrogen needs owing to the oil and gas industry that they have. And most importantly, they are growing their energy demand. So these hydrogen needs will increase with the time. Therefore, it seems like a good opportunity to start producing hydrogen there. Moreover, they have a huge gas infrastructure already built, and this infrastructure could be used for our hydrogen. Moreover, hydrogen, we are thinking of hydrogen as a sustainable mean, but we need a sustainable intention by a country in order to install it. And we see that there are high investments produced now in renewables in Saudi Arabia, for example. Moreover, households, they are using natural gas. If we want to eliminate that, we should also think how hydrogen could impact in that sector. And finally, Saudi Arabia, their economy relies on exports, oil exports, but as Bram said, oil demand will decrease in the following years. What if we just substituted that by hydrogen exports? Would it be maybe a good substitute for them, a good idea for them? So considering everything, how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, today we could inject some hydrogen, specifically up to 4% in the current pipelines that have natural gas in Saudi Arabia. Then we could produce some synthetic fuels that could be used in conventional vehicles, and start targeting the hydrogen vehicle sector, first of all with heavy-duty vehicles, as my colleague said, for the advantages it presents, and start building a hydrogen export hub in terms of the future. But this sounds like a little bit challenging. How are we going to do it from now to 2040 to achieve this challenging goal? So today, as we said, we are going to start providing hydrogen to oil refineries, start injecting hydrogen into the pipelines that have natural gas and start producing syn fuel for conventional vehicles. But by 2025, we should start promoting a lot both hydrogen vehicles in order to target hydrogen passenger cars, but also safety issues for hydrogen. Why would someone accept hydrogen for cooking if they think that there is a risk there? So there is a big campaign needed there. Then we would start creating our first fuel hydrogen stations, and with the mindset of growing and growing and growing and targeting every time more hydrogen vehicles. By 2035, starting exporting, and like the final goal would be becoming the biggest hydrogen exporter and completely substituting the natural gas they currently have by hydrogen. So this is our proposal in order to evolve up to 2040 in hydrogen.
Thank you so much. I would say stay tuned, follow the newspapers, how the initiative is going to develop. If you have some savings left on your account, approach Miles and Julia, perhaps you can be part of it. And we are very excited about the idea that the HydroCat team came up with, as well as the other perspectives and the other ideas that the teams came up with. So many thanks once again for the opportunity of taking part, and thank you very much.
Hey, thanks. Really good. Well, fascinating. Very, very interesting. I certainly, I for one, learned a lot there, and I think the Middle East and hydrogen. I think plans are already afoot for this sort of economy. So I think this will be the future. Thank you very much. Now, we'd like to move on to the next challenge, the industry changing technologies. Quite sounds very simple, but obviously not. I'd like to welcome on stage Jesse Morris, Chief Commercial Officer of the Energy Webb Foundation. Welcome.
See if I can get the slides to come up here. Okay. Great. Yes, so hi everybody. My name is Jesse, Chief Commercial Officer of the Energy Webb Foundation. We're a nonprofit organization focused on bringing blockchain technology to the energy sector. What I thought would be interesting, we just pulled together some fresh content based on everything we'd heard over the past couple of days. I'm just going to spend a few minutes covering these 4 areas. First, a little bit of context, why we at Energy Webb Foundation think there's so much potential for blockchains and energy. Second, speak a bit about how our organization and community are working to bring the tech to the energy sector. And third, we'll have a little bit of fun. Our team, who's been here for a few days, heard some what I would call myths about what blockchains can and cannot do. So maybe we'll play with that for a moment. And then I'm going to invite the winner of our Initiate Challenge, Farhan, to come on stage, and we'll have a bit of a presentation on what his team put together, and then if we have time, some questions. So first, just a little bit of context. I think we've all seen a number of presentations on this stage and others about the energy transition. And indeed, that story is the same for us at EWF. The grid is evolving from a legacy architecture that's really been characterized by one-way flows of power and money between customers and utilities, and it's moving to a completely different grid architecture where the roles and relationships of customers and devices are being completely reconfigured, where lots of different devices ranging from water heaters to solar panels to electric vehicles are all being called upon to support grid stability. And that emerging grid architecture really looks like nothing we've seen in the past 100 years in the history of the electric grid. When we look at that emerging grid architecture from our perspective at EWF, a number of things need to be true if we think it's going to scale globally. Things like making sure that architecture is very cyber secure. Things like making sure that architecture is characterized by very low transaction costs, and some of the other requirements on this slide. Long story short, we think that blockchains in the energy sector can help fulfill a number of these requirements, which is why we've launched the initiative and the project. So let me speak about how we're looking to bring this technology to the energy sector. In the kind of greater crypto and blockchain space. Everybody likes to geek out and talk about the tech. But what's as equally important about new software, new technology is your community. So we're really proud of our community, and for our affiliates in the room, I apologize, we need some new logos on this slide, but we have about 90 different what we call affiliates who have come into our ecosystem. It's a combination of utilities and oil majors in the corporate vertical here, a number of different startups and innovators who we've been joined by in the past couple of days at the conference, and then also some different financial players who all share our hypothesis that blockchains can bring value to the energy sector. So that's our community, and the community is experimenting with a lot of different applications. You don't need to absorb everything on here, but suffice it to say, there's a lot of interest from that community in, quote, peer-to-peer applications. Also a lot of energy around things like using blockchains to change demand response programs, increase energy access in emerging economies, you name it. Lots of different applications. And all of those different applications are being run on different platforms. Think of a blockchain like a platform, a piece of software that you can run an application on. This slide shows different platforms that are being used in our ecosystem. Some people are using the main Ethereum blockchain, some are using our test network, others are using different platforms. Our vision with EWF is to build a single shared open source public blockchain platform that's specifically built for the energy sector. So if you look at this technology stack, this is the simplest way I can describe our vision. You've got the physical world on the bottom, you've got assets, smart meters, electric vehicles, you name it. Anything that uses or consumes electricity connected to a blockchain. In this case, I'm showing the Energy Web chain. And on top of that chain, you've got applications like the one that's going to come up and present on a minute about how you can use this platform in the energy sector. So that's the simplest way I can talk about kind of maybe just wrapping your head around blockchain and energy. But now let's just bust a few myths that I heard in the past couple of days. Myth number one, who here has heard, show of hands, that blockchains use way too much energy to be useful in the energy sector? They're just horribly energy inefficient. Have other people heard that? Yes. Okay. So I'm going to say that's a myth. The Bitcoin network that many of you have probably heard of indeed uses a lot of energy. In fact, about 73 terawatt hours of energy a year. That's as much as, depending on the year, Denmark or Ireland. That's a lot of energy. However, mining, which is the way that nodes on the Bitcoin network achieve consensus, is one way to achieve consensus in a decentralized network. Our chain, the Energy Web chain, uses a different method of achieving consensus, and it has 200 times the network, the performance of the Bitcoin network, and it only uses the same amount of energy as a medium-sized office building, not a medium-sized country. So one way to think about the energy consumption piece. Myth number two, there's a prevailing narrative that blockchains can't handle the massive amount of transactions that happen in the energy sector. I'm going to go ahead and bust that one too. Our technology, according to our analysis, so our chain, and frankly speaking, other chains in the ecosystem, are absolutely capable of handling the throughput of hundreds of different applications running on the chain. And in fact, we're going to be releasing a report on this in the next couple of months on exactly that topic. Finally, the last one that is probably the most controversial is about, Jesse, I really don't think that public blockchains are going to fit for the energy sector. Can you really imagine an architecture where dozens of devices are connecting to a blockchain with nobody controlling who can control what? We need a private chain. Private blockchains are the only way to go. My response to that would be, if you'd like to set up a private network, go walk down over here, talk to Amazon, and set up a database. That is a private blockchain. We're building something different. So if you move to a private architecture, you're foregoing some of the benefits of a public blockchain. And in fact, you can actually get some of the benefits of a private blockchain around security and privacy by using public chains like ours, where we've built technology that brings the best of both worlds. So I mainly put these up here to just maybe double check some of your assumptions when you're thinking about blockchains and how it might apply to your companies. So next, I think I'm going to bring Farhan up here to talk about their application they built. And I'm not going to spoil the name because it was incredibly clever. So let me hand it over.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Starting, thank you to InnoEnergy and the game-changing impact for bringing us all the InnoEnergy students here, and thank you for Energy Web Foundation for giving us this amazing challenge. I can just highlight that we also started this challenge with all these myths. And the more we went to the team of Energy Web Foundation, it started to get clear. So we were a team of 6 people, and we started to look at what we can do by using the platform of Energy Web Foundation. And we came up with a solution. We call it aggregators. So we are a team of young individuals who thought that what will be the best market coming in the coming years, and it's starting right now, and that is electric vehicles. So we wanted to have a solution for the end consumer where the world gets easy for you. You don't have to pay multiple bills every time you charge your electric vehicle. So we came up with this solution in which we leverage the technology of blockchain by using the platform of Energy Web Foundation, and we offer services to charging owners and retailers and connecting them under this umbrella of blockchain. So we reduce the transactions that are happening every time in now the daily system, and then we also create a composed bill that will help the end consumer and make it easy for you to just pay one bill at the end of the month. So we were happy to come up with a solution, and it was an amazing experience to experience the value that blockchain offers. So thank you to Energy Web Foundation for that.
Thanks, Farhad. Can I ask you one question? Could you speak a little bit about, for your team, what were some of the biggest learnings that you kind of discovered as you went through your design process? You mentioned one around kind of uncovering what some of these myths are. What were some of the other learnings that your team picked up on as you went through that process?
So one of the things that we were just thinking was most of our team was our energy engineers from InnoEnergy Master School, but we were not very familiar with the blockchain concept. So we were just thinking that blockchain, most of us had an idea, it's Bitcoin or whatever, so it was cryptocurrency. And then it started to have a debate, and then we said, okay, it's not gonna solve now, let's go to Oriol there, and then let's ask him what's gonna happen now. And then he started to explain, guys, blockchain has numerous applications. And then we started to think about it, okay, electric vehicles, we can play with that, and that's where we come with aggregators.
We can share.
Yeah.
Yeah, are there questions from the audience? We'd love to take a few. Back here.
Hi, I'm Hernan Marcovecchio. I'm representing Sony Corporation. I see blockchain as a digital platform, right? EWF is an NGO. Could you explain how the business model would look like for you, and how you're planning to make money from it?
Sure.
Thank
and I'll take this. Just very briefly, so for us, it's all about creating this platform that's incredibly low cost and open source that can host all of these other platforms. So for us, there's not really a business model at this stage. We're a foundation trying to bring something more as like a public good. Most of the money is here, right? So, I mean, how could you monetize? You talked a little bit about it, but what was the thinking on the business model for your application?
We were thinking that we will create this platform of offering services to retailers and charging owners. Mm-hmm. So our first customers will be retailers, and whenever they use our system, they pay a small amount of fee whenever an EV owner makes a transaction and in the end pay a bill. So we will get remunerated from that. And process of that, finding that business model was not that easy, and we went through many different startups presented here, and we were able to think of what can be the possible transactions we can make and have getting money out of it. That was the process.
One other question? Man, it's getting late. Okay.
So hi, I'm Joe, and I'm working also on very similar projects as well. So we're using also blockchain and working also on the mobility part. We are facing problems as many blockchain companies. So maybe a question to you, how do you think can you integrate blockchain in EV charging points to the end user? by facing the problem of IoT, and how would you address it? Like how would you implement peers in EV charging? Do you want to integrate peers in EV charging, or do you want to have peers only on the utilities or at the energy suppliers, for example?
Great question. A couple of ways to think about that. So first, did you spend any time back here with the couple of EV companies that were kind of trying to crack that? Yeah. And you met some of our partners that were working on it back here? Okay. Yeah. I mean, long story short, establishing a root of trust for IoT devices to connect to a decentralized platform is not easy. And in fact, it's one of the things that we have quite a bit of resources going into right now. And our team used our electric bike, right? People probably saw it, that was actually connecting to a platform. And we had actually installed a light client on a charging station to connect to the chain. Are there simpler ways of getting assets onto a chain? Of course. But it becomes it's kind of a trade-off. Where do you want to establish that root of trust? Is SCADA enough, just taking an API and connecting to a utility's SCADA system? Or do you really want to go to every single charging point? Open question, and frankly, it's not even our decision. It's about the companies we work with. They all have a different answer. Yeah.
Another myth, perhaps, it's security, no? You didn't mention it. So the how secure is the blockchain system? You mentioned 3 myths, but it's perhaps another myth that that can also come.
That it is or isn't secure?
The lack of security.
Lack of security. I don't know if that's I mean, for us, it's usually brought up as a benefit that decentralized networks are more secure than a centralized network. So is that the direction you were going, or were you saying the inverse of that? Okay, yeah. Sure. So generally speaking, we tend to say that decentralized architectures are more resilient and secure than a centralized architecture. The Bitcoin network has been in operation since 2009, and it has its problems. It uses a lot of energy, but it's still running. I mean, that chain, you can track it from Genesis all the way to today. And one of the reasons that that feat has been accomplished is because there are thousands of different nodes running the exact same instance of that software across the globe. So it's a naturally resilient technology. It's paranoid by nature, so it uses pretty advanced approaches to cryptography and public key cryptography. Happy to talk more, but generally speaking, we see it as a pretty big benefit.
Any more questions? Okay. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jesse.
Thanks.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really good. I think. Okay, now moving on to the final challenge, the journey of a new community, and I'd like to welcome on stage Molly Webb, who is founder of Energy Unlocked. Welcome.
Thanks everyone for staying. This is very exciting. When I heard that last year 98% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years, I thought finally sort of the disruption, the new business models that we've been hoping for, the value shifts that we see coming in many different sectors are just beginning. Really the scope and scale of change that's to come is bigger than what's happened before, and energy is no exception. And finally we might be able to achieve what we predicted 10 years ago as an IT industry, that we could achieve 600 billion in savings through smart energy solutions in 2020. That's only 2 years away. So a decade ago we thought 600 billion opportunity in smart grids, smart buildings, smart logistics, smart transportation, smart cities, and finally I think we're on our way to achieving that. So what's happening now in energy, which we need to apply all this data and IT capabilities to, is a dramatic shift. It's sort of a moment of truth in the energy industry, I think. The end of fossil fuels is coming eventually. I would like to see it sooner than later, and the rise of decentralized renewables. And all of this means that we're electrifying transportation, we're electrifying faster, the rate is increasing, and these peaks and the volatility and the challenges to both the physical markets, the grids, are coming. So that shift is not an easy transition. We need all of the tools we can to apply to that. We see the answer to how you would apply all of the technologies, the smart technologies, to this problem as flexibility. We've heard a lot about flexibility at the conference already. So simply, you've probably heard of it before, but it's not just how much energy we consume, but when we consume it. So we are really interested in taking all of the disaggregated, distributed, fragmented value and devices that are out there and creating a flexibility resource. And this is going to be the sort of buffer, the sponge for intermittent renewables in our system that we need, and all of us can benefit from it. So what we're doing, Energy Unlocked, is running a challenge in London. It's supported by the mayor. This challenge is to help London achieve its decarbonization and pollution reduction and social goals through demand-side flexibility. That's obviously not easy. When you get down to the city level or a community level, you have energy market values, that's the green here, which may be not that material, but matter to the grid. You may have a lot of value on site. Some of this is energy value, some of it's non-energy value. Whether you're a home or a business or an office, you're going to be thinking, is this going to disrupt my business? Do I get anything out of this? And then we have the value London cares about. Are they putting themselves on the decarbonization pathway that's their policy goal? Are they able to do that while bringing down costs for every energy consumer in London? Are they able to not dig up roads if they don't have to? Are they able to electrify transport as quickly as they need to? If this value is fragmented, we're never going to see this opportunity arise. So we were running our Flex London process. We're just in the midst of it now. It's a multi-stakeholder process. It involves physical meetings. It involves an online platform. But we thought, let's bring this challenge here to the students and say, how would you scale flexibility? Local value, local problem solving, local markets, what would it be for you? And we knew this was really hard, so we brought a number of mentors here. So Rob Friel, who's here, who has a background in the distribution networks in London, Gail, who's here, who has a background in finance and IoT in smart cities and helping companies really create their value propositions. Alex, who's an energy efficiency finance guru and an entrepreneur in his own right. I have been working in the last 2 years on blockchain protocols and tokens as an enabler of some of these new business models. And finally, Michael, who co-sponsored this with us with the Foreign Office, because the Science and Innovation Network of the UK is very interested in seeing us share ideas, what we're doing in London, what other cities are doing, how can we improve and scale. So that was the challenge. It wasn't easy. We were so impressed and surprised, and we laughed. They were funny presentations. It was such a great group. I'm going away with a lot more to think about than I expected. Really, what we challenged this group to do was not to think about the technologies, because we have a lot of those, and we have a lot of companies that bring technology. We asked them to think about, where is the value for the community? Where is the value for people? Where's the value for businesses? Where's the value that can't be counted, that can't be priced in today? And they took that on. So we're really pleased. We had to introduce the team that won, though we had to choose only one. It's a great honor. So Fabio, come up and tell us about it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, great. So I'm going to present the idea on which I and my team have been working on in the last 2 days. So we have been speaking to lots of experts in this conference. We have been taking inspiration from many projects around, and we came up with this solution. So it's really late, so I will try to keep it simple. First of all, which is the difference between these two teams? I'm not speaking about the performance. I'm speaking about who owns those two teams. Chelsea is owned by a private guy, but it's a private club. But Barcelona is owned by the people. The members of the team, the members of the club owns actually the club. So how we can use this analogy in energy markets? Let's have a look at the classic aggregator model. I guess that most of you are familiar with this type of model. Basically, we have an aggregator who's going to aggregate some small loads, the prosumers, and is going to monetize the flexibility through the BRP and the DSO. The problem here is that, the money that are going actually to the prosumers are too low, is too few. They are not interested in that in comparison to the efforts that they have to do. So this is like the Chelsea-inspired model. That's why I use that analogy. So we said, okay, let's try to have a Barcelona-inspired model. So we thought instead of having a private actor, a private aggregator, why don't have an energy cooperative, something owned by the people, something that will actually feel the people to be owner of what they are doing, feel people engaged with that. The idea here is that the money that are monetized from the flexibility are not going to be given to the people, but are going to be invested in the community through some project that has some really strong social benefits. Something like PV in a school, we can raise awareness about the benefits of renewable energy among children. Something like, okay, maybe, I don't know, some one of you don't like that, so maybe, I don't know. Sorry?
There's no space at my school for solar panels. What else can I do?
Yeah, exactly. So maybe a gym, we can refurbish a gym, and maybe being a member of the energy cooperative, you can have a discount in your local gym, in your neighborhood. Or maybe, I don't know, everything that comes in your mind, co-working space, some like refurbishment of some community centers to have some fancy offices and co-working space, something like that. So that the point here is how the people will feel the ownership, how the people will feel engaged with that. Imagine, we miss just few thousand pounds to achieve that target. Let's make a bit efforts all together. So that's the point here. In order to, let's say, which is the role of our Sherry, our model. Basically, we design it as a platform which can connect all these cooperatives around the city. And we also thought, okay, we need something more. We need a way of basically spreading this model. So what are those companies who are in every street, in every neighborhood, really close to the customer? Supermarkets, for instance, or car-sharing companies. They are everywhere. Their infrastructure is everywhere, and also they have a really good, from a technical point of view, they have a really good capacity from flexibility. Like Sainsbury is already doing some flexibility offers, for instance, and we know that electric vehicles could do that also. So these are what we call the sponsor of these energy cooperatives. That is everything from my side. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks. Any questions, ideas, thoughts? It's the end of the day. So one of the things that this team were doing, and many did, was figure out how they could aggregate not just the energy values, but the demand for flexibility. So that was what we really liked about it. No other questions? No one wants to know if it's built on blockchain? Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Your question, I guess.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, hello. Have you discussed your idea with some DCO or somebody from the grid?
I would say not yet. We have seen some examples of this type of cooperatives model. There are some projects going on, not in UK, but there is like a project called FlexCop that are building this type of models in Germany and in Spain, I guess, in Basque Country, I guess. But no, that's for sure a good point, and that's what we have to do. We have worked on that in 2 days, 1 day and a half, so yeah.
The network operator in London, so they definitely got to test their idea with at least one expert. You can ask Rob later. Anything else? Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks.
Great. Okay, well, thanks everyone for staying until the end. I've just one thing to say. It is deliberate that we start the event in the summit area, and we end the event here on the Initiate floor. Really, we end with the beginning. This is where the innovation is. This is where the young talent is. This is where the future is going to be going from the sector. And it's something at Clarion Energy we're very proud to keep pushing this Initiate, taking it global, and to really trying to make an impact. And just very quickly before we wrap up, I'd like Siska to come on stage. Siska is the purpose behind this working all the time. So I'd like to stand up and give her a round of applause, and thanks very much. She really appreciates me doing this, I can assure you. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for staying to the end, and hopefully we'll see you next year in Paris.